My name is Elizabeth Jepson, and I'm going to tell you about the 5 stages of grief. Loss can be a scary thing, and the aftermath can be devastating. I've lost 4 grandparents, and I'm still working through the stages. I've also grieved the loss of my health when I found out I had chronic kidney disease. Although there is more than one solution to dealing with grief, knowing the process can help you understand the emotions and changes that come with loss. What is grief? Grief has many different definitions and meanings, but it is most commonly known as sorrow after a loved one has passed. Many people associate grief only with losing a pet, a family member, or a friend, but grief can follow any type of loss. Losing a home, losing a dream job, experiencing the end of a long-term relationship, or a divorce in the family can all result in long-term grief. Grief is very complex. Everyone is different and will work through their loss in a unique way. The 5 stages are experienced differently by everyone. It can be experienced in any order. There's not just one way to grieve. According to the EKR Foundation, the stages of grief were introduced by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. Elizabeth was a doctor and wrote a book named On Death and Dying. The stages of grief are included in this book. The book was inspired by interactions with her patients and her insight on how they dealt with knowing the end of their life was near. Even though the book is 40 years old, it is still often referenced. The first stage of grief is denial. Denial is sometimes called shock. Denial is very common because it protects ourselves from feeling the profound impact of our loss at that time. When people are in denial, they might tell themselves what's happening isn't real, or it's all a bad dream. According to grief.com, denial allows us to survive and cope with the loss. The website also says that when denial begins to fade, healing begins to start. The second stage of grief is anger. When reality of loss starts to settle in, anger tends to build. This can be the most damaging of all the stages because it can push people away when they are needed the most. Anger from grief can be directed to a family member, doctors, friends, or even one's own self. People can be angry at their loved one for dying. They can be angry over people not showing enough support after the death. Or they can just be angry the situation happened. But regardless of where the anger is directed at, it's ultimately our way of sorting out our emotions and trying to come to terms with the loss. The third stage of grief is bargaining. Bargaining can happen before or after a loss. Before a loss, if a loved one is sick, someone might promise to be good in hopes that their loved one will survive. They might also wish to die in place of their loved one. The stage of bargaining often includes guilt. The guilt could be about not getting someone to the hospital in time, not blowing out the candle that caused the fire, not being able to say goodbye, or guilt over something that was said or unsaid. The fourth stage of grief is the depression. Feelings of depression and sadness often settle in after it is realized the loss really did happen and there's nothing that can be done about it. At this stage, withdrawal often occurs. So it's important to stay around people that care about you. This ensures the safety of the person grieving and prevents them from becoming too isolated. The depression stage can unfortunately last for years. The fifth stage is acceptance. Acceptance doesn't mean that the loss no longer matters, or that it's forgotten. It means the loss is understood and is no longer resisted or denied. Acceptance means allowing ourselves to move on with our lives while still acknowledging the loss we encountered. This stage is freeing to many people. Tips to cope. Grief is a hard event to get through, so it's important to take the time and reach out if needed. According to WebMD, Some suggestions to try is to give yourself time to recover. Keep in mind that it's not a race to start feeling better. Talk with others. Even if you don't talk about the loss, talking is a great way to prevent becoming isolated. Return to your usual routine. This doesn't mean things are normal again, but it's important to get back to hobbies and daily life. Join a support group. This helps to get reconnected to the outside world and realize you're not alone in your grief. What now? After everyone has gone home and you're alone with your own thoughts, you might feel alone. These feelings are very normal, but it is important to be gentle with yourself and remember that life goes on and there's more to live for. Keep in mind the stages of grief can last years, and grief does not actually go away. It becomes your new normal. You will never be the same person you were before the grief. But as Queen Elizabeth II said, grief is a price we pay for love.